is I pulled this off at the project last time, and I just want to kind of state it again for the record, both for the public but also for the developer, of the Park Place project. I'm feeling really conflicted about this project and this ordinance overall, and as somebody who is a staunch supporter of density and height where it's relevant. But this overlay district and the project that it'll enable, that's we've been talking about, is 14 stories. It's 160 feet, and what I'm really struggling with is that it's not consistent with our comprehensive plan, which we just adopted in August. It's not consistent with what we have in the draft form-based codes, which we're presently considering and looking to adopt, albeit we may be editing that. And, so we just spent a lot of years on that comp plan and getting community input, and I feel like we're kind of jumping to trying to make our zoning fit a project rather than a project fit what our zoning and our vision and our comprehensive plan is. And I'm supportive of density. I'm excited about this project. I think the potential of this project could be really great. Brings a lot of things that I'm very interested in, for sure. But we're tweaking things here, and I don't think we've even given it a hot second to let some of the developments that are going up see how those have changed our landscape, and we're already talking about kind of changing some of that height. And I think the other thing that I just have some concerns about is that, generally speaking, when you look at sort of urban transects, and I think this is why our master plan was like this, you're kind of going from the most dense and you're tailoring down as you get closer to the neighborhoods. And this overlay district goes up and abuts to those properties on Abbott, which would be, pretty abutting to some residential areas at 14 stories. So I have reservations. I have nervousness. I will be very interested and engaged to hear what the Planning Commission's conversation is. I think in referring this, I would specifically like the Planning Commission to consider two things. I mean, one, whether this overlay district is consistent with our master plan and our draft farm-based codes. And the vision, really, because the different districts may say something different, but if the vision overall and some of the work that went into that, there's some arguments for this being consistent. I just would be interested in their take on that. And then I think if they do feel like it is, or if additional height is warranted, I would like their feedback to the council specifically on whether an overlay district is the appropriate tool. I think the other thing I'm struggling with is that, we've passed our master plan in August. We have not yet updated our zoning code to implement all of the, the things that are in there. We haven't yet finished our discussions around the form-based code for this area, and I just want their input on whether an overlay district is the right thing, or whether we should be just going ahead with our zoning code updates, whether we should be moving ahead with the form-based codes to do with this. And I know there are timing issues, but I don't want those timing issues to dictate policy that is going to impact our landscape for potentially decades to come.
Yep. Okay. So I want to offer a bit of a counterpoint on some of those points. I think it's high time that we have a conversation about height downtown.
And you're not using that as a pun? Is that high time?
On so many fronts.
I think you're giving me more credit than maybe I deserve. What was I talking about?
It's high time.
You must be high.
Yeah. I think it's time to look at essentially amending our master plan, and especially the height parameter for the downtown area. There is a number in the master plan, the current master plan, which is 10 stories. I think that number has been in there since 2006, if not before. It was in the original big picture master plan. And then it got picked up, I think, and transferred into the bigger picture master plan starting in 2013. So that number is at least 5 years old, and I think it's been overcome by events. Lots of things have changed since that 10-story number ended up in the comprehensive plan. And one of the things that's changed is we now have a 12-story building downtown, so people have a reference point. They can go downtown and see what 12 stories looks like and ask themselves whether another couple of stories is actually going to matter to that. So we have a reference point that we didn't have before. And I think the reason we didn't have that reference point, we didn't have tall buildings 5 years ago is one of the reasons that that 10-story parameter didn't get a lot of discussion. And so now it's time to have that discussion. We have had situations before where areas of the city have developed in directions that required an amendment to the, what amounts to an amendment to the master plan. There was a Trowbridge corridor study done a few years ago that essentially did a spot update to that, to the 2006 master plan. And if I've characterized that incorrectly, then maybe Tim could let us know a little bit later. But I think now might not be a bad time to think about that for the downtown. A special study area that says, okay, is there a region of the downtown where it makes sense to go higher? But I also want to read just a sentence from the bigger picture master plan itself concerning that 10-story parameter. And this is in the context of the M4, the mixed-use 4 zone downtown. And what the narrative actually says is that building heights of 10 stories are recommended within the mixed-use 4 category. And so if you take that literally, as people have sometimes been doing, they've been saying, well, there's this limit of 10 stories in the master plan, and that means we can't go above it in what we approve. If you take that language literally, it says that all building heights in the downtown should be 10 stories, which doesn't actually make any sense. We want mixed heights. And so I think a sensible way to read that is that it's saying an average of 10 stories, with some buildings shorter and some buildings taller. And I think in my mind that easily accommodates 14 stories or higher without even going back and revising that parameter. I think that's already countenanced in the language that's in the master plan. We have had several cases now also where projects have come along that have driven code changes, which does seem a little bit backward. It seems like there should be code changes that then enable certain projects, but we've had at least two where it's been the other way around. And one has been the hub, which when that project came over the transom, we amended the form-based code in East Village to allow that development. And I think that was a productive amendment, and it's going to probably generate more development that we want in that area. Another example is the parking requirements. When it became clear that the Park District project was not going to be feasible with the amount of parking that we were requiring them to put in, one of the things we did is we changed our parking requirements, and that was a good move, I think. It was an appropriate policy move. And so I would not have predicted this a few years ago, but I think that projects come along and drive policy change, and I think we're facing another situation like that here. We have an opportunity now to have a conversation about taller buildings that's been triggered by a particular project, and I think that's actually an okay way to drive policy. And then the second last thing I want to note is that I don't want to lose sight of the fact that building up has real advantages. It's environmentally sound. It brings the density into the downtown that we need to generate new businesses. And there are certainly potentially some drawbacks. I know people are concerned about congestion. People are concerned about rents going up. And so there is a debate on the substance to be had about whether height is a good thing. But I want us to stay focused on the substance of whether we want height. And I think height is good, and I wouldn't have said that 4 years ago either. But I look at that building out there, and I think it looks pretty cool. And I wouldn't mind if it were a couple stories taller. We do have to make sure that we're buffering neighborhoods and parks appropriately. But I think that this overlay district that we're proposing is a good start on that front. And then I guess what really is the last thing I'll note is that this really it's not our master plan, it's the Planning Commission's master plan. So they need to square the circle and figure out where they want to be on this. But I want to point out again that you can't take a limit of 10 stories as a hard maximum and square that with the fact that they've recommended three 12-story projects for approval, two times for the Park District and once for Harbor Bay. So that is another reason why I think that 10-story parameter in the current plan needs to be interpreted not as a hard ceiling. So, but I guess to sum up, I think it's appropriate to have this discussion, and I'd like to sort of keep it at the substantive level and sort of think more broadly about what height means for the city.
First of all, I just want to say, I don't actually think that's necessarily a counterpoint. I mean, that's partly what it is partly what I'm saying. I think the time is now to have this conversation about height. And I'm not even saying I'm opposed to 14 stories. There are lots of reasons, the ones you named, that taxable value is higher. What I'm struggling with is that and I think you're right, projects can sometimes drive a trend, but we are now I think we are at a bit of a tipping point. We have approved some projects, we've changed, they are under construction, our physical and our built environment is changing, and so if we are going to make a decision to change a policy, I want to make sure we're doing that in a substantive way, in the context of bigger things, and to me, I want that to be happening. If the master plan needs to be changed, I would argue that average is a very different thing when it comes to the built environment, so I disagree with you on that point, but in terms of how you're interpreting that. But I think if that needs to be changed, I think that's legit. I think your point is a very legit conversation point, that the planning commission and we can have that conversation, that was maybe an old number, and maybe we do want to have this conversation. I just don't want to have it piecemeal, and I definitely want to be, if we're going to have it, I want to have it in the context of if we are about to make other zoning changes that are also reflecting our master plan, if we are also about to adopt a form-based code for this district, I would like to do this, have this conversation, have this be done in a way that feels rational, that the community can weigh in. Yes, we feel more comfortable going this way. No, we don't. Then we obviously have to weigh that out. But and not just sort of saying, well, 12 seems pretty good, so let's keep going up, and not, when we really don't have the full scope of what those all look like yet. So, and we won't by the time we're probably considering this. But I want this to be I'm okay having the conversation. I'm not sure I love the tool.
I'm guessing we're going to have this conversation again. So.
I move approval of item 12 from the consent agenda, which is now the first business item, I guess. Second business item.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we need to circle back.